I want to demonstrate how to add a 1-inch border to a paper using a ruler. One thing to note about rulers is that some of them are made where 0 doesn't start at the very edge of a ruler, but actually starts a little bit in. So that's one of the first things you want to pay attention to when using rulers and taking measurements. So don't start from the edge, find the 0 mark and measure from there, not the edge of the ruler itself. What I usually do, if I'm just laying out a border for an artwork, I usually use a H pencil or HB, something that will be a lighter lead or graphite, and I can erase easily later on. For this demo, I'm going to use a B pencil, so it'll be a little bit darker and show up a little bit more. So one thing that I do is I actually take the time to do it right. I want to make sure that my paper is square. This is a printer paper, so I already know it's basically square, but in case you're using another kind of paper, the first thing you want to make sure is that you find a square 90-degree angle. I make a series of small dashes. So I line up my 0 with the edge of the paper, and I find one and put a little dash. Then I'll either flip this whole thing around, but this is 8.5 by 11 paper, it lines up with 11. I'll measure 1 inch inward and place another mark. And I'll go around and do this for all sides if I want my border to be 1 inch all the way around. So something like 8.5. I just want to make sure that I measure 1 inch inward. If that is confusing, just put it, either go ahead and start from the 0 and measure 1 inch in. And so I have 2 more marks. And all these tick marks will erase later. All right, so now that I have tick marks on all 4 sides, just do a quick visual check, make sure, and you might even use a ruler to line it up and see that it looks okay. Just in case maybe if you started at 8.5, maybe you didn't calculate that right. So what I do is I will go ahead and maybe I won't go all the way to the edge. I line up one mark with the one across the paper from it, and I'll draw a line very lightly. I don't want to add too much pressure, just enough so the line becomes visible, but it'll be easier to remove later on. And I'll go around each side and do that again. So I'm lining my ruler up with the mark I've made earlier with the mark across from it. I actually made a mistake here, so it's slight. It's only 1/16 off, but it's enough where I would be bothered by that. So this is why you want to visually check as you go, because maybe it doesn't all make sense. Since I'm going to be erasing this later, I'm just not going to touch the other one, but that looks better. So as they say, it's best to measure thrice, draw once, or cut once. So I would say for erasing, I usually like to wait until as late as possible to do any erasure. It's okay if you leave a little bit there now. In case you're working on something all in graphite, you might have to erase the borders at the very end anyway. And the more you erase on paper, the more you wear down its tooth. And so sometimes you, as you start to work in pencil, you might find if you erase a lot, it gets harder to erase over something you've already erased, and or it kind of looks different, and that's because you've pressed down the paper a lot. So at the very end, if you wanted to erase borders, there you go, masterpiece. I usually would use a kneaded eraser to start, or go ahead and use a clean version of the white eraser. This is not very clean, so you might actually, before you erase, clean off any dirty erasers with scrap paper. I have some on hand. Oops. And see, this is all stuff that could be smearing on my drawing. So I like to keep scrap paper around to clean my erasers. Same thing with kneaded erasers. You can use other paper to kind of clean off anything extra. And it goes back to being a lighter gray color. Check your fingers. So going back and erasing, you can use either the kneaded eraser if it was light indeed. But I prefer using the white erasers for really removing material. This is computer paper, so it doesn't have a lot of tooth. There we go. So make sure to erase those marks in the corners. Oops, being careful not to do that. Those would be points off for craftsmanship. So take your time when you're erasing, and you can use something like a spare tissue, a clean brush, something to wipe away any kind of erased bits. And go back to those initial tick marks, make sure you get rid of those as well. Beautiful. And sometimes it smears the drawing material, just go back and gently try to remove that as best you can. Voila.